The gallery typically is dark and there's only one light in it. It's a little ominous, and they wanted sort of that hesitancy of, should I press this? There's a note that says press it. The thing behind me is The Killing Machine, which is a piece by Janet Cardiff and George Burris Miller. It's a kinetic sculpture with various moving parts.
Janet and I developed this piece in when was it? 2005, I guess. We were living in Berlin. It was a bleak winter. We were reading Kafka, specifically in the penal colony. It's a very early portrayal of state violence against people.
In the narrative of the novel, prisoners are sentenced to death, and their sentence is essentially tattooed onto their body. And so you can see behind me the two robots sort of act as the judge and executioner, in a way, tattooing on sort of the imaginary body sitting in the chair. The button triggers, and the arm swings, and then there's sort of this discordant, music playing. The robots sort of do their sort of initial, I would say, like assessment of the chair. And then there's the man's voice, the typing instructional audio track, and he's sort of sentencing, the imaginary person in the chair.
Your left thumb should be underneath your palm.
And then the robots do their sort of tattooing of that sentence, and that's when sort of everything swells. The guitar starts to resonate, and the panels start to vibrate, and then the TVs all start to come on, and then the lights all sort of change, but then it all sort of settles. Like that's when it gets sort of magical or more peaceful.
You can't pause it, so. If anything's wrong with the motors, then you have to deal with it.
Okay.
So you're going to basically be phoning us in.
I'm a media conservator, which is also sort of known as a time-based media conservator, because obviously media encompasses many things. And when you look at a painting, you're looking at it for a certain amount of time. But the works that we deal with duration as sort of a critical element of the piece. So that could be, a film, video, where there's a clear start and end. And then with this piece, which is a kinetic sculpture, it's also sort of a performance. So there's a clear beginning and ending to it. We have been working on The Killing Machine for about 2 years, I want to say, 2 to 3 years. In 2008, we acquired the work. Once we first got wind that it was being planned for the 2019 expansion, and I think in the fall of 2017, that's when we really started to get to work on it. We first just got all the crates out of storage and started to open them up and see what was inside. So we did an inventory of all the material, to find out what this piece consisted of. And so we're seeing robots and guitars and things like that, and worked very closely with colleagues in curatorial and exhibition design to really design the space. So the space requires acoustic isolation and sound isolation, because while the work is a kinetic sculpture, a large part of it is the light aspect and the sound aspect. With a work that's complex like The Killing Machine, there's a lot of moving parts, literally. So what we want to understand from this is just what to the artist is very significant in terms of the performance of the Killing Machine, the lighting sequence, the audio, so that we can really, develop a method for the long-term care and preservation of this work within our collection.
Do you still need the ladder?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, so we've still got the 2 lights to do.
The best way to sort of serve this piece and to understand this piece was to work very closely with them. So what we decided to do was basically take our edition of the work and send it back to them at their studio in Greenrod, British Columbia. And then myself and Ellen Moody, a sculpture conservator, would go and basically sit side by side with George in the studio and really get an understanding of the work. It was able to be set up side by side with their edition of the work or their artist proof. So what that allowed us to do is really compare it to something that has been in good working order for the past 10 years. They were able to apply enhancements to our work. So we also went to understand what those enhancements would be. So it's really like a knowledge gathering trip. We also wanted to test it a significant amount when we installed it here at the museum to really understand how fragile it would be, what sort of care and maintenance it needed. And because the museum was going to be shut for the entire summer, that gave us a big window to just really get it installed, understand it deeply. So during the installation, not only did George Miller come, but also Carlo, one of his technicians, who actually built the two robots behind us. He engineered and designed the robots. So we learned a lot about the robot care and maintenance from Carlo firsthand. And so then that informed our plan for how to care for it when it was being exhibited.
This one's over here, and then it brings it back. Okay. So then it's like this, and then the board will crash. Okay. So now what we do in the sequence is we do this by hand. Mm-hmm. All the robots should be in their sync positions, and then it's actually going to turn the base out to put it in a safe position.
Okay.
But then there's a loop built in, so once it plays past these loop points, then it will loop.
Okay.
So it's going to play this, it's going to turn the motor out. Oh, did it crash the thing? It crashed. Okay, so I have to reboot the board. That's not R1, it's R2, so I don't know what R2 board is.
We sort of anthropomorphize the robots. We talk about how they are misbehaving in the piece, or they're behaving, or they're having stage fright.
They're like little creatures, aren't they? They're pretty weird.
It's funny, they each have their own quirks. So R2 doesn't like to turn as often, but we've sort of fixed that aspect to him. And then R1 was having an issue with his arm for a little bit that we were able to address. So they all have their little needs. This is what we really pay attention to when we're maintaining it. We want to make sure these rods here are lubricated and just everything is running smoothly.
So our version, because we show it a lot, has always been improving. Because we had a lot of trouble with the robots at first, so there was a lot of breakage with these things. Because the original flexible shafts were just from a drill shaft that we bought at Canadian Tire in Canada, and they were like $15 each, and they would break every show. So these are super high-end aerospace industry shafts now.
This is a fail-safe here. So the fail-safe is triggered if something were to go wrong with the robots or something like that. It cuts power to them so that they are kept safe. So once the exhibition opens, my job is really just to maintain the piece in its daily operation when it's on view.
Yeah, because if anything goes wrong, it can damage itself quite badly. The motors are actually way stronger than they appear.
The brain of it is this computer program called Digital Performer. But really what it is it's a puppet show. It's just triggering different aspects of it. But like if you know George and Janet's work, a lot of it is sort of, there's puppet theater aspects to a lot of their pieces. And so, I describe it as a kinetic sculpture, but if it has, a start and an end, and there's a clear arc to it, I think of it as sort of like not a Punch and Judy show, but something like a puppet show to some degree. The last time I got called was 2 weeks ago, and it's typically in the switch on, switch off procedure that sometimes it's not as obvious, so I field those calls. We're really good at eBay searches and have a network of electronic hobbyists and things like that to really understand, what are the significant properties of just a cathode ray tube television? How do you care for it? How do you extend its life? Because they're of a vintage and need to have static, which is actually a rare thing these days. So we have to make sure that these obsolete technologies are available for this work. Working with George and Janet along the way has been critical to building our understanding of the work within the collection, because it really helps us to not only exhibit the work faithfully, but also care for it 50 to 100 years in the future, so that when my successor goes to install this piece, they are operating with a wealth of information, so that they know what acoustic properties are necessary, what lighting properties, what the physical space is needed to install this work that is in keeping with the artist's intentions. I don't want to sit in the dentist chair.